If you don't know if you can use ISO 27001, the cybersecurity standards, to comply with the NIS2 directive, then this video is for you. So I'll show you how ISO 27001 maps with the NIS2 and what does this mean in practice, how you can actually use this standard for implementing the directive, and I'll also show you in one particular example of a document what is the difference between 27001 and NIS2 documentation. And after you watch this video, you'll have a clear idea on what you can use 27001 for and what you cannot use 27001 for when it comes to NIS2, and also what is the right direction when it comes to compliance with NIS2. And I made this video for security officers like CISOs, but also for CTOs, for project managers, so everyone who is in charge of complying with this EU cybersecurity directive. And to learn more about NIS2 and ISO 27001, you can click here to subscribe to my YouTube channel. When mapping ISO 27001 with NIS2, you actually have to take into account the relevant articles from NIS2 to map them towards 27001. And there are three relevant articles in NIS2. This is Article 20, Governance, which explains how management needs to govern the cybersecurity and some requirements about training. Article 21 about cybersecurity measures, and Article 23 about incident reporting. When we analyze Article 20 in more detail, you will see that these requirements that the senior management has to approve the cybersecurity measures also exist in ISO 27001, and basically this is the clause 6.1.3 about risk treatment and the risk treatment plan, also 6.2. So this is basically where these two frameworks actually match. Also, this requirement in NIS2 that the top management needs to oversee the cybersecurity implementation has also a parallel in ISO 27001 in terms of measurement, reporting, internal auditing, management review. So all of these sub-clauses that are part of clause 9 in ISO 27001. Also, Article 20 speaks about this obligation of companies to have regular training and awareness. This is also something that is present in ISO 27001 clauses 7.2 and 7.3, and also in its Annex A. So I would say that when it comes to Article 20 of NIS2, you can completely map it towards ISO 27001. When it comes to Article 21 in NIS2 cybersecurity measures, there are more than 20 specific requirements in this article which specify which kind of cybersecurity measures need to be implemented, including backup, business continuity, incident management, cybersecurity, hygiene practices, authentication, secure communications, etc., etc. And when you analyze these, you can actually see that all of these requirements in NIS2 can be mapped to certain controls in ISO 27001. Maybe there is one exception, and this is about crisis management. NIS2 requires crisis management, and there is no appropriate or parallel control in ISO 27001. This crisis management is maybe more going towards ISO 22301, the business continuity standard, but 27001 does not really mention anything similar. So I would say out of all the requirements from Article 21, only one requirement cannot be mapped towards 27001. And below this video you will see a link to an article which maps in more detail all the requirements from NIS2 with specific clauses from ISO 27001. In its Article 23 about incident reporting, NIS2 is pretty specific on what kind of reports need to be sent towards authorities, starting from early warning, incident notification, intermediary report, progress report, final report, and so on. And ISO 27001 is not as specific as NIS2. Therefore, it would be hard to map really 27001 to NIS2 in this regards. And because NIS2 is much more specific, and it's better to basically build your incident management, incident response based on NIS2, whereas 27001 is not really of much help there. However, when it comes to Articles 20 and 21, ISO 27001 is much more detailed than NIS2. So you can actually use ISO 27001 as a guideline for governance, for cybersecurity management, especially for risk management, which is also part of Article 21. because this way you will get a much better, let's say, best practice on how to implement NIS2. This also means that if you already have documentation for ISO 27001, then you can actually use this documentation almost as is for NIS2. For example, if you have, I don't know, disaster recovery plan, then all you have to do is simply insert a reference to NIS2 article, but basically use this document as it is, because NIS2 doesn't specify anything specifically about a disaster recovery except that you need to have it. Same thing with the access control policy and so on. However, if you have an incident management procedure, you will probably have to adapt it. You will surely have to adapt it because of these specific requirements from NIS2, and I'll show you a little bit later on how this looks like when you write a real document. Now the question is, are you allowed to use ISO 27001 for NIS2 compliance? And basically NIS2 does give you some direction in this regards. It doesn't specifically mention ISO 27001. It actually mentions that you can use international cybersecurity standards for further compliance for NIS2. Also in its preamble, so this is the kind of introduction to the text of the NIS2, it does mention ISO 27000 series of standards. So again, there are, let's say, indications here that you can really use ISO 27001 as the leading international cybersecurity standard for compliance with NIS2. Now, some countries like Belgium actually openly offer the option to use ISO 27001 for compliance with NIS2. Of course, it's still early to see what the other countries will prescribe, but again, at least one country for now is allowing officially ISO 27001 as the leading framework for compliance. So what does this mean in practice? If you already are compliant, if your company is already compliant with ISO 27001, then the best thing is really to do this gap analysis and see what documents you are missing. And you also have to slightly adapt these existing documents so that they have references towards NIS2, and basically this would be it. Now, if you are not compliant with ISO 27001, you do not need to comply with this standard to be compliant with NIS2, because 27001 does have some requirements which are not needed for NIS2, for example, statement of applicability. So instead, you can go directly towards complying with NIS2 without, let's say, observing everything in 27001. And you can, by the way, see an article below this video which shows you all the steps in the NIS2 implementation. And you can actually use, once you go through these steps, you can use 27001 as a best practice to write some of these documents. Okay, let me now show you one document, one ISO 27001 document that needs to be adapted, heavily adapted for NIS2, and this is incident management procedure. Okay, here on the left-hand side you can see incident management procedure for 27001, and on the right-hand side is the same procedure for NIS2. So if we scroll down this 27001 procedure, you can see the front page, change history, table of contents, purpose, scope and user, reference documents. All these things are basically the same as in the NIS2 procedure. Let's see this one. So you can see almost the same things. Small differences here that you have these references to NIS2 which we don't have there. Now the first bigger difference is that NIS2 has these definitions, especially important for significant incidents, because you want to clearly explain what is the difference between significant and regular incidents. And then when you scroll down further through this 27 procedure, so it has explanation about receipts and classification of incident weaknesses and events, and then treatment process, treating minor incidents, treating major incidents, learning from incidents, disciplinary process, collection of evidence. You will see more or less the same things here in the NIS2 procedure. Maybe a little bit more text, but again, it's more or less very similar. Then the biggest next difference is that here in NIS2 procedure we have this reporting of significant incidents, and then here you can see these various reports that need to be sent because of NIS2, and you will notice that such explanations are not existent here in 27001 procedure. So when we scroll down, you will see that this table is very lengthy, and then comes the end of the document. Okay, hope this was helpful, and you can click here to open a link towards the NIS2 documentation toolkit, and there you will see all the documents that you need to comply with NIS2, and you will also see a preview of each and every document for this particular EU directive. Thanks for watching.